In this story we meet a Korean who was forced by his mother to follow the path of shaman, despite his desire to lead a normal life to live his own life. He finally left his family and pursued prestigious studies. However, he died and was reincarnated in another world which partly resembles ours, but which is also very different. In this world, two great powers coexist: magic and science. Although few people are endowed with magic, this has remained frozen since centuries. While science, as the noble-looking man boards a train and goes to his cabin number 403, there he finds an old military-looking man reading a newspaper talking about the Civil War in Utah. According to the newspaper, this war would have been won by the faction of the princess. The train starts to leave at the same time. A discussion is started by the two men on the Civil War. The young man introduces himself under the name of Luger. The old man, as for him, introduces himself under the name of Gerard. As the discussion progresses, Luger reveals that he comes from a fallen noble family and that he is heading to the Seren Academy of the Exilian Empire, where he has been accepted as the new magic teacher. This academy is known to be very selective. She hires only prodigies, 2 sons, and needles. Luger tackles a rumor according to which the Civil War was not won by the princess, but by a mercenary named Machiavelli. This name undoubtedly refers to the famous Italian philosopher of the Renaissance in our world. However, Gerard seems skeptical about this rumor in any case to break what he suggests, but in reality he is the author of this exploit. Machiavelli was one of the many pseudonyms he used during his life. He is in reality the real hero of the story. Suddenly an explosion breaks out in the train, causing the two men to come out of their cabin to check on the situation. Then, big surprise, a terrorist goes through the window, shattering the glass, and tries to attack them. Luger manages to retaliate with a magic attack, immobilizing the salient on the ground. Trying to interrogate him, the terrorist opens his jacket showing explosives and blows himself up, digging a hole in the armature of the train. When the old man regains consciousness, he no longer sees the Uter by his side and concludes that he may have died in the explosion. After checking his body, the old man finds himself with part of his real face exposed. The old man's identity was a disguise. Removing his mask, a young man's face, suspiciously resembling a lugger, appears. The protagonist reminisces about his past. He admits he didn't actually have need to use the Machiavelli, as if there was a reason it would just be to use a known name from his past life. He traveled the world all his life and was involved in many incidents, thus forcing him to change his identity repeatedly. Although he felt sorry for Luger, he was curious to once again be involved in a new incident. A train agent arrives and finds our generals in front of the hole formed by the explosion. This agency seemed to evacuate the passengers, however the agent is quickly attacked by our hero, who declares that such acting would not work on him. Our hero explains that the attackers couldn't board the moving train due to its speed, and it wasn't possible to break their magic-enhanced mature. Therefore there had to be an accomplice involved in the attack. Once uncovered, the train agent pulls out a knife, but he is stopped short and taken hostage. However, shots are heard from the door. He stabs the accomplice in a hail of bullets. The remaining members of the terrorist group erupt and attack the hero without warning, but their weapons are rendered unusable by the magic that the hero has just activated. However, his magic is countered by a mage hidden among the enemies. Surprised by the news, he decides to jump from the train through the hole, but in reality it is part of his strategy to organize a counter-attack from the roof. However, the enemy group also attacks him and follows him until he reaches the bottom compartment. An explosion occurs as it reaches the bottom compartment, which disorients the group and makes them realize that they are not the predators, but rather the prey, and that they have just entered the real predator's territory without him realizing it. The back compartment was detached from the rest of the train, putting an increasing distance between them and their objective. The hero remained inside them. Surprise attackers with magic, proving he had set a trap in record time. It was prodigious. The hero almost animated the enemy group with his magic. Only the leader was still partially alive when suddenly a surprise attack of magic of ice executes the leader of the terrorists. It is the appearance of the Knights. The leader of the Knights questions our protagonist about what happened to him, and she makes sure that he is fine. She introduces herself as the screw captain Veronica Deville. Suddenly the police officer surrendered from the Metropolitan Police interrupts their conversation. He announces that he is investigating the attack on the train. He explains that how quickly the terrorists were taken down doesn't make sense considering he had a mage in their rank, so he suspects an accomplice is hiding among the passengers, and they have to verify each one's identities. By hearing this, the hero is put in difficulty because he no longer has his disguise. He must not be discovered. When the investigator arrives at the cabin, he finds that the old man who should have been there is not there. He then questions the hero. He offers the explanation that the old man was caught in the explosion. He introduces himself as Professor Ludger. From now on I will call the hero by the name of Ludger. The Knights offer him of the escort to Seren Academy. academy, but he refuses after they leave Ludger. Dissatisfied to see that the world he finds himself in is not up to his technological advancements to differentiate him with the real Ledger, but, unfortunately for him, he gets stopped in the street by an academy employee Seren who is assigned to escort him to the academy. He can't refuse while he is being escorted. Ludger thinks back to the academy employee and realizes that he is not an ordinary man. Indeed, he did not feel it coming, which suggests that it would at least be former knight of rank who can't slip away. Ludger makes a decision that will change the rest of his life. He decides to continue impersonating the Ludger and to become a professor of the prestigious academy. Once he arrives, he presents himself at the office of the director of the academy. She was waiting for him with a piercing smile. As if she had already unmasked him, the director asks him some kind of question, asking him if her ride went well, alluding to the terrorist train attack she heard about. Ludger responds positively, which dispels the principal's concerns. She is glad the incident does not affect the reputation of the academy. Ludger had many thoughts during this brief exchange. He wondered if the headmistress had figured out his identity. Maybe she had already seen the real Ludger. However, these concerns were swept away when they said it was the first time she had seen him, and she was delighted. The employment contract the manager provided him stated that he would work for 2 years with a room in a personal office as well as a monthly salary of 30 imperial gold coins, which equates to approximately $300,000 per month. Ludger resides to accept the employment contract offered by the director of the Seren Academy given her situation, but he convinces himself that he would be suspected if he refused such a full offer, especially after having traveled all this way by train, so he resigns himself to accepting the offer, telling himself that at worst he will play the role of teacher for 2 years before regaining his freedom. After accepting the work contract, Ludger goes to his room, which is large and luxurious, to rest. He must start his lessons in 3 weeks and understands that he must prepare his lessons carefully so as not to be suspected by the students who are supposed to be geniuses and the future matches of the country. By thinking back to his identity, Ludger realizes that it is perfect. He is a fallen nobleman from a small country without brothers or sisters and with dead relatives. The letters he gets from acquaintances of the real Ledger are just formalities, which means he is not close to anyone and no one can identify him, so this is the perfect identity to impersonate. 2 weeks later, while having a coffee at the restaurant of the Ludger Academy, is surprised when a hooded person engages in conversation with him. The latter lets him know that she is happy that he is safe and sound. This mysterious person knows the real Ludger. She asks him why he hasn't contacted them since his arrival and informs him that the other members are curious about his activities. She calls the Uter the First Order with a burst of lucidity. Ludger replies that he had something to do check before. However, the mysterious person adds that the terrorist attack was not planned and that he did not know that the rebels were going to attack. Ludger remains silent but announces that he will need information about the academy. During the conversation, the person in the hood says that all the important personalities of the academy have been executed and that the traitors have been eliminated. However, she ends up apologizing, which makes one realize to Ludger who superiors them to her. Ludger puts pressure on the person in the hood by warning him not to make suspicious movements during this important moment. He must be able to infiltrate the school without being suspected, so he must not compromise her infiltration. She nods, trembling in fear, which suggests that this person was frightened by the real Ludger. Leaving the restaurant, Ludger breaks into a cold sweat thinking back to how dangerous this organization is to his identity. After arriving in his room, he takes time to think. He realizes that Ledger's identity is perfectly fashioned. The real Ludger and was just a facade, a falsified identity. Indeed, he is a fallen nobleman with no family, a 4th rank match, and on top of that a professor at Seren Academy. After analyzing the papers sent to the real Ludger, he discovers that instructions given to him they indicate that he must gain the confidence of the teachers and the director of the academy in order to receive new instructions by later. However, he realizes that he is in a delicate situation because he must not only be wary of the academy but also of a secret society. He begins to wonder if the real Ludger is still alive. He finds Slice, that an organization leader capable of planting dozens of spies in the empire's largest academy, died in a simple train accident. He considers he could take the risk of posing as an ally of the Empire Academy in hopes of defeating the secret organization. However, he knows it's a risky bet. When back to school, the students discuss the arrival of a new magic theory teacher. The former teacher was fired because of a floral humo student who noticed her technique was bad. She had enough power to fire a professor from the academy. The students are very excited to have a new professor who was a military officer during the war and who is in addition a fallen noble. Some of them think they can intimidate him and get good grades since his social rank is lower than the lure. When the new Blouse high school teacher arrives and pressure sets in, he announces that his courses will be different from those who have known him, access mainly onto practical application, and provokes the pupils by saying that even the first years can participate in it. But above all, he warns the pupils against the temptation to persecute him for his status as a new teacher or a fallen noble, claiming that he will be intransigent and that he will regret having this attitude. With such a proud speech, he is sure that few students will attend his classes. He is delighted to be able to spend the 2 years teaching a small small group of students. While benefiting from a more than comfortable salary, the students were shocked by the pressure he emitted. During his speech they avoid meeting him in the halls when suddenly he meets a new teacher from the academy. Selena, against all odds, invited to lunch. After following Selena, Ludger finds herself in the presence of 3 other neutrino teachers in charge of the class of summoning golems: Merida, who takes care of the class of hallucinations and captivation, and Chris Benimore, a noble despising the commoners. Blessed Dead refuses to mingle with the other teachers, considering that being a fallen noble he is superior to them. Chris Benimore no longer wishes to stay in this improvised meeting and takes the opportunity to insult the other teachers before slipping away. While the other teachers decide to leave for lunch in the evening, the students exchange via a magical social network and discuss the new teacher of magic, Ludger. They learn that he was the youngest age to reach the 4th rank, that he was an officer in the army, and that he has experience in hunting. Freak, the source of these rumors, seems to be the hooded girl from earlier. She wishes Ludger is a lot of students so he can infiltrate the school easier. When Ludger's first class, he walks into the classroom thinking that he would have few students after his intimidating speech the day before. However, he is surprised to see that all the places are taken. The classroom contains 80 seats and there are many more of students that the day before. A silence settles in the classroom. He introduces himself once again to the class, especially to new students. During his first lesson, Ludger seeks to captivate the attention of his many students. For this he decides to present them with a 3rd rank spell, the floating flame. He explains to them that this part is necessary to understand this technique, which can be tedious. However, he announces that he will teach them a way to cast the spell 3 times faster. The students are surprised by this announcement, wondering if he is possible to cast the spell 3 times faster without making it powerless. Even Floral Humor is not sure of the feasibility of this method. Some students wonder if the teacher is managing him or if he is going to change the structure of the spell, which would be equivalent to cast a different spell. Flora realizes that the only possible solution would be to use a parchment engraved with the spell. But if he does that, Flora will not hesitate to defame the professor. He goes on to the fact that he will not modify the structure of the spell, he will only modify the casting speed. Floral Humo, and categorically it is impossible. Ludger presents the problem from another angle by asking Anne if it is not that a spell can't be improved, but no one has ever tried. He explains that the Magista, because everyone is busy respecting traditions and repeating history, while science has advanced so much that it threatens magic. He presents the thing to them as can magic also be improved to continue the course. Ludger wishes to demonstrate to Flora why she is wrong. To think that modifying the casting speed of the spell is impossible. He asks her if she knows the casting speed of the floating flame spell, to which she answers second, but adds that some mages can cast it in 5 seconds. Ludger asks Flora to come in front of the class to cast the floating flame spell. She accepts and casts the spell quickly in 4.78 seconds, which surprises the other students. However, Ludger tells her that it is way too slow. Everyone is surprised by this statement. Ludger raises his wand and casts a different spell too. Everyone surprised, the spell turns into a floating flame and activates in less than a second, more precisely in 24 milliseconds, and all without losing power or efficiency. He presents this technique as a spell that casts another spell. It is a technique that he himself invented. With his knowledge of his old world, Ludger had a definite advantage over other mages. He imagined magic as programming, where mana was transformed into data, the match becoming biological material, and the technique a series of instructions, the 3 components activating the software called magic. He named this magic the source code. Ludger reprimands Flora Lumo for intervening without her permission. Due to her prejudice, he gives her 10 penalty points. The students are shocked to see that the famous Floral Humo was reprimanded. However, Ludger goes on to recognize that his demonstration of the spell was perfect. He therefore grants him 10 reward points, thus cancelling the penalty points. After this presentation, he announces that at the end of the year, he will select a few students from among the best who will have the chance to learn the source code. Eden, one of the students, is fascinated by Professor Ludger during his class. Despite the rumors, he is convinced that he is an incredible professor. At the end of the class, as the professor leaves the class, Edane praises him, but a noble pupil insulted with donkey. It is the son of Baron Filio. At the same time, another pupil appears. While defending the ladies, he almost starts to fight, but the situation calms down quickly when he warns the Baron's son that even though he is a noble, he will have a lot of difficulty if they attack, because the Seren Academy is much more powerful than most new houses. This student introduces himself to Haydn as Leo. He looks like a nobleman, but he is actually a commoner like him. Professor Ludger is delighted to have succeeded in captivating the students, even if it was a risky bet given his delicate situation. However, if he wants to avoid being discovered, he must prepare himself even better for his next classes by entering his personal office at the academy. For the first time, he is welcomed by the director, who warmly invited her. The office is spacious, adorned with luxurious furniture and filled with books. The room is illuminated by a large window near the library. All the professors of the academy have a desk similar to this one. It can do what he wants comfortably while staying close to their classroom. They have a conversation, the two of them. Ludger wonders wonders why she is here. As for the principal, she pierces him with her eyes and scrutinizes each of these gestures, while making him knowing that he is a valuable teacher for the academy. He wonders if the principal noticed something strange in him. Maybe she has doubts about his identity. He is convinced that she knows that a secret society is at work in the academy, and maybe she even suspects him of being part of it, which is not totally strong on leaving her office. She tells him that she expects a lot from him, but once outside her face becomes gloomy. She does not know if she can trust him. She goes on to the fact that she observes the most vulnerable individuals more suspicious, that she can't come to a conclusion about Luger's affiliation. She tells her butler that even after using the Viscania demon eyes of faith, Luger showed no reaction. A fourth-rank magician would normally have confessed her guilt instantly. She wonders if her resistance is due to a desire to make the headmistress suspect that the gender isn't the real teacher, but rather one of the attackers on the train who supposedly took Luger's appearance. However, she unaware that the real teacher was just a facade from the start, but that for now she won't act, she will just watch him very closely. Teacher Luger goes through the list of students to familiarize himself with the names and the families in order to preserve his secret. He notices that Flora is a member of the Ham family. He wonders if the Duke will try to put pressure on him following the incident involving his daughter, but another name catches his attention, that of Aiden, a student with a machine in common. He then has a thought: the mysterious girl from the secret society he had contacted previously in the restaurant called him the First Order. She called him so confused with the real Luger. That means the real Luger used to change his appearance. Maybe he was an expert in disguise and infiltration, but at least he didn't have to worry about his physical appearance anymore. The courier knocks on the door and gives a letter to Luger. This letter informs him that he has been appointed to carry out night surveillance within the walls of the academy. All the teachers take turns to this task, and tonight it is therefore the turn of the Uter. While Professor Luger makes his rounds, an argument breaks out in the magic training room. A noble asks a commoner to leave the room to her, even if the latter had reserved the slot. The young noble then asks the commoner to kneel in front of her, but the commoner decides to leave without causing more problems. However, the noble takes this action for revolt against her status and attacks her with an electric spell. This attack was blocked instantly. It was Professor Luger who just stared. He would have preferred to settle this dispute with a simple warning, but now things are more complicated. He asks the young noblewoman to follow him. Suddenly she shouts that he is only a simple fallen noble. The atmosphere of the room changes abruptly. A heavy pressure sets in place. Ledger's gaze turns black and amped up with hatred in her, staring. The professor Leames approaches the young nobleman. He asks her to repeat herself. As she shivers in fear, his gaze turns livid. He asks her if she called him the fallen nobleman. Heavy pressure builds up as Luger's dark gaze stares at her. The other students panic and call teacher Selena, who is going to Luger to understand the situation. Luger makes the young noble understand that despite his status as a fallen noble, he remains a teacher within the academy and that she is challenging his authority. The Uter decides to let the young nobleman's misbehavior pass, but he warns her never to challenge his authority again. He leaves after having verified that the young commoner was not injured. He calls her by her name. She is very surprised that the professor remembers that she is following her course, which confirms her in the idea that in this academy everyone is treated equally. In the middle of the night, Luger sits on a bench suffering from headaches and auditory hallucinations. To ease his pain, he swallows 3 pills from a medicine bottle. Itis his last vial. He can only last 5 days with this last vial. He must contact her supplier the next day. In the cafeteria, Selena and Luger discuss a rumor that a werewolf was snooping around students who visited the town of Level that the day before saw a black figure moving in the fog on the roofs of the buildings. However, the two professors are not worried about it more, knowing that it is only a simple rumor. The discussion is linked to Professor Marilda, who mentions to Professors Luger who approached him a subject particularly interesting during his first lesson. The other teachers observe them discreetly, all eager to know the secret behind the source code and to appropriate it. Among them, Professor Chris Bennymore seems particularly old, staring at him intently from his table. That evening, Luger travels to Leetville town to investigate the rumor of the werewolf. He waits on a corner of the Bald-Eaton for the sudden creature's arrival. A bestial form appears from behind and tries to attack it. However, Luger easily dodges it and counterattacks by throwing the beast 10 meters away with a well-placed kick. This creature turns out to be his supplier of pills. Hans. Luger asks him what took him so long before approaching him and replies that it's been a long time since he's been was not seen, but he is annoyed that the genre is not even surprised following this attack. The two consider themselves to be brothers and discuss at length after their reunion, but when Luger broaches the subject of Hans's appearance, he becomes embarrassed. He has a puppy's face on a bodybuilder. Luger does not hold back from laughing at him openly, and C is a human with a special peculiarity. His body takes the form of anything that bites him. Unfortunately, he got bitten by the puppy. He then asks the Uter if he brought the contract gene to cancel the transformation. Luger responds positively and pulls out a syringe. After taking breaking the contract. An gradually transforms back to resuming his human form. He continues their conversation in bringing up Luger's secret identity as a teacher to Soren. An is puzzled as to why Luger created this identity and asks him how he got there. After explaining his situation to Hans, he mocks Luger and of his situation regarding the academy and the secret society. He then discusses that the real Luger was part of an unknown secret society he was called the First Order and that he is trying to infiltrate the academy. Hans recognizes the name of the First Order. He mentions that new individuals call themselves Black Dawn in the underworld. Luger must be well prepared to deal with problems. At the same time, Luger receives a briefcase from Hans containing medicine and other items. Luger asks why he is only arriving now when he arrived 2 days ago, but Hans does not understand. Luger suspects that Anne is the werewolf that is talked about in the rumors given its shape, but Anne confirms that it happened to Lutherbull. That only today the two remain silent for a moment. The two brothers are surprised by seeing a real werewolf on the roof from a building. Anne suggests he leaves so he won't be spotted, but Luger thinks the werewolf will see them if he suddenly moves. Luger notices a necklace soldier around the werewolf's neck and decides to go and have a closer look because he thinks that the werewolf may have been lured into the city for a specific reason. Hans points out to Luger that it has been a long time since he didn't see him use his weapons. The last time was when he was a monster hunter. He used the pseudonym of Abraham Van Helsing, named after the famous vampire hunter in literature and cinema of our world. After sensing the presence of Luger, the werewolf jumps with incredible force and lands a few meters from him. He notices the collar around his neck and decides to analyze it once the werewolf is subdued. The latter was screaming and attacks Luger with great speed, but he manages to dodge thanks to his movement magic. Luger is backed up against a wall, and the werewolf approaches him dangerously. However, he uses sound magic, which quickly puts him on the ground screaming in pain. Luger didn't need to use a silver bullet to incapacitate him. Then he pulls out a syringe to inject something into the werewolf, but they are interrupted by voices that are heard, maybe that of the police, which allows the werewolf to escape while Luger is distracted. Luger throws a grappling hook to catch up with the fleeing werewolf, and in the blink of an eye he is flying over the rooftops. In the next one, determined not to lose sight of him, the policemen make their entrance following the noise while Luger chases the werewolf through the roofs. They make a frantic race until he stops on the roof of an immobilized train. Luger pulls a shuriken out of his jacket and throws it as the werewolf rushes towards him. Unfortunately, the shuriken narrowly passes the werewolf. However, the shuriken makes a U-turn, but the wolf manages to avoid it. From again, he attacks the werewolf with magic. It used to be gold for a surprise attack from behind. Although they manage to hit him, it's not enough. Luger decides to rush at the werewolf, throwing another shuriken, who manages to touch his arm. Luger jumps to continue attacking him from the skies with his cane, but the beast blocks the cane with his jaw, giving the Uter time to pull out the hidden blade of his cane. He lands a blow with precision, slicing the werewolf's head and ending the fight. On the other side, Hans continues his run to approach Luger, but he is startled by the werewolf's head falling at his feet. Luger tells him that he finished gathering the information he needed. He didn't need to throw the werewolf's head at his feet, but he did this to surprise him and get revenge for his surprise attack earlier during the fight. Luger realized that the werewolf was not a real creature, but rather an artificial monster, so he assumed that someone may have deliberately let him loose in the city to cause damage. He tells Anne that they are going to set up camp in the city, stating that this place is better than the capital and that he currently has no choice with the history of the academy. He asks Anne to gather information while waiting to return to the academy. Luger reads in a newspaper that a serial killer slaughtered more than 10 people and that a werewolf's head was found. The newspaper also indicates that the culprit will soon be arrested. Luger is shocked by his revelations because his fight against the wolf where it took place on Saturday and the murders took place on Sunday by another werewolf, which suggests that there was not just one creature loose in town. The next day, Luger attends a teachers meeting. He sits next to Selena. The other teachers keep watching it, but the urge to take ownership of the source code. Selena brings up the subject of the attack on 2 students who were assaulted by a monster the night before. One of the students described the monster as a terrifying beast. Selena remembers the werewolf rumor and starts to wonder if it was unfounded after all. The headmistress walks into the meeting room and announces that a salient has appeared in Soren. She mentions that 2 students were found seriously injured, and they say that the criminal is a creature werewolf. However, Professor Hugo Bertag interrupts the conversation, saying that it is impossible and that werewolves do not exist in Soren. They are protected by the exiled empire. He adds that the victims are nobles, so they must be commoner students. The headmistress is really annoyed at this accusation. He makes up for it by questioning the other teachers and if it was beautiful and many commoner students behind this attack. After all, why only nobles were injured among all the students? He would be more full to believe that this be either someone who impersonates a werewolf rather than a real werewolf. Some professors favoring the supremacy of noble Rican. When bringing up this possibility, Luger is shocked to see that the Black Dawn is in a strong position, with professors clearly affiliated with their cause and inclined to ridicule the headmistress's interrogations. When suddenly an origami falls on Luger's shoulder, he discovers a message which tells him that 3 experiments have managed to escape. Luger must eliminate them immediately or capture them alive. If caught by the authorities, his identity will be revealed. The experiments mentioned are the artificially created werewolves. Luger realizes the Black Dawn did not anticipate the werewolves' escape, although he is satisfied that the Black Dawn is suffering serious damage. It poses a risk to his identity, so he must act for them without getting caught by the academy or the returning authorities. On the discussion, the director orders the teacher to warn the students and give them penalty points if necessary. Finds himself walking in the garden of the academy after the meeting. When he realizes that he is being followed, he asks his stalker to come out of his hiding place. It is the young girl in a Capricorn he had met earlier. She knows how to infiltrate him in the academy as a student. He asks her what she is doing here, but she is unable to respond. He then offers her a coffee. The two of them find themselves around a table in the cafe from the first episode. He asks her name and she answers her, says La Rochelle. Luger suspects that she is lying and asks her real name, but it's beautiful. Well, her real name, so it sounds like she is a noble. After casting the sound blocking spell for their conversation, she explains that the recent werewolf events are linked to one of their affiliated organizations and that a dark mages was conducting experiments on monsters at Tesa School. This group of scientists was fired from the secret society due to their experiments in ethics, but she did not know exactly what the experiments were carried out and some subjects escaped. The subjects must be eliminated as soon as possible. Reveals to her that he has already eliminated one of the werewolves. She is in awe of him. Luger wonders why such a talented person for gathering information and for infiltration is still part of the Third Order. He thinks that she is perhaps underestimated because of her noble status, especially in a combat organization society. She is surely used as a disposable pawn. He could potentially make an ally of her by leaving. Luger compliments her work. She cannot do nothing but thank him, lowering her head as if it were the first thanks she received in her floral life. Yumo witnessed the scene from outside the cafe. She notices that the dissipation of the magic of sound blocking and wonders what sort of discussion necessitates such a spell. Flora Lumo is underway, but her mind is elsewhere, obsessed with the sound blocking spell that Luger had cast. Thanks to her special ability to see magic as color, her understood what it was. She keeps wondering why he used that spell and what he was talking about. At the end of class, some students are attracted by the idea of catching the werewolf that prowls around the academy despite the warnings of the teachers. Indeed, the city offers a reward to whoever manages to catch it or neutralize it. Most of the students are reasonable and don't pay attention to this challenge, but others are tempted and decide to try their luck, thinking that they can get by without getting caught by the teachers. Yusid, a friend of Leo and Aiden, considering themselves their rival, to provoke them, offering to capture the werewolf that prowls around the academy, but Aiden refuses because he has court and can't go out at night. Tassier tries to break him into asking him if he's scared, but he doesn't pay attention to his provocations. Finally, Leo accepts the idea to make Yursai leave, knowing that the teachers would probably take care of the werewolf anyway, but Leo had no idea that Yursai is serious. He was on base when Aiden told him that she will surely do it. The two get up and look out the window. He sees thus sneaking outside. They get scared and start running to catch up with her. During her round of night, Luger thinks back to his day and at the request of Professor Hugo Bertak not to put penalty points on the nobles even if he crosses them outside of class hours, he had refused. By moving a bush, he discovers 3 students who were hiding. He gave them 5 penalty points. He has already discovered 20 students as looking for clues earlier in the base. Adina told him that the werewolves came from the sewers. He is then directed to the only ego at is large to contain a werewolf, and after walking a few yards to find wolf footprints. However, he discovered different type of footprints, large and small, both going in the same direction. A little further, the footprints separate at a fork. He follows the larger ones which are heading towards the academy. At the same time, Luger hears a trident crisis and quickly moves towards his source. Arrived on the spot, he finds a werewolf who is attacking 2 female students. Luger then prepares a fire spell and launches it on the beast, dazzling him and the Tyndall project. Luger arrived in time. He gives 5 penalty points to the 2 students, the innate princess of the empire, and returned to exile. While the creature is still a few meters away, the 2 girls are shocked by Professor Luger, who seems to give more importance to the point than to their safety. The princess asks him if he shouldn't worry about their well-being first, but Luger remains adamant, so she tries to negotiate to remove the stitches, a line she had dozed off during the day, and when she woke up it was already too late. Luger's sermon line. The princess is stunned by the turn of events, knowing the werewolf was still just steps away before returning to fight the Ludjar creature. Finally takes the penalty points off the 2 female students. Luger is preparing to attack the werewolf when suddenly he runs away. Luger chases him while shouting at the 2 students to go to refuge immediately. The werewolf climbs on the roof of the academy and Lugrant follows him at the trail using her grappling hook. The 2 students are confused by the situation. She thinks Luger is using levitation magic. It is very high level magic. As the duel on the roof continues, the 2 go on high speed jumps while leaning on the walls of the roof before attacking. When the wolf is about to attack him, Luger casts a fire spell to destabilize him and gain Heidi attacks again from the skies. The 2 students wonder if this is really a mage fight. Luger Casts cell magic to throw the werewolf who attacks him, then uses an ice spell to end the fight despite being exhausted after using lots of mana. However, the creature is not dead and throws a bridle at Ledger, who manages to block the attack with a magic shield. The werewolf manages to escape before Ledger can fully defeat him. Ledger is shocked to see that a werewolf can use items. Given their water nature is supposed to be primitive, he wonders if they really are werewolves. At the same time, and Aiden and Leo are looking sitting in the forest. When the seniors hear a noise, the two rush towards the sound without looking. It is then that Aiden hits Sitting, who was hiding. When they arrive at the scene, they hear a growl. Tassus then tells them to lower their voices and follow her. A little further, he discovers a baby werewolf hiding in a bush, and Aiden sees a shiny object on the baby werewolf, but it's already too late. The big werewolf has already returned. The creature attacks the three students. He suddenly finds himself in danger, and Aiden stands up to protect his friends and tries to negotiate with the werewolf. He promises not to hurt his child. Against all odds, the werewolf understands and approaches his baby, and Aiden offers his help to the werewolf to save his child. When he reaches out to take the bottle, the beast is pierced by magic. It is Lugger who has just arrived, and Aiden stands against Ledger. He tries to protect the werewolves, but when Ledger looks at the two werewolves, his gaze turns black. He was pushing Aiden and finishes off the two werewolves. The next morning, the three students are scared for what is going to them. The director arrives accompanied by the Witcher professor. They understand that they will have difficulties to get out of it. Ledger is very strict with them and makes them understand that he could have died. The director interrupts him and asks him not to frighten the students. She informs them that Lugger has given them all the information about it. Against all odds, she gives them point penalty for putting themselves in danger and 20 reward points for their bravery. The three students walk out, and Aiden is puzzled. Once that they are outside, the director asks if Ledger is satisfied. In reality, he is the one who asked the director to taking care of the children. He was simply playing the role of the stern professor. When she asks him for details about the werewolves, he replies that there was nothing strange about this discussion. Ledger finds himself alone and thinks at this moment what had irritated him. It was that he had understood that the experiments carried out were not made with an animal base as it is normally done, but with a human base. The baby had only half of his body, which was metamorphosed. The other half had remained human. During this time, the three students think back to what had happened, and Aiden thinks back to the baby werewolf. He is sure to have seen a shiny object around his neck. That is why he tried to arrest Professor Ledger. He kinda suspects he's trying to hide something, but he won't go further in his speculation because after all he's a professor. He wants to go eat. When he asks Tassus to eat them a company, she blushes. Does she have feelings for Aiden? Lugger consult a list of missing persons and gatherings in town. This is information received by ants. It turns out that the most suspicious place would be an abandoned factory. In the evening, guards watch the factory. He talks about the experiences that got away when suddenly they hear a noise. They pull out their gun and get their heads stabbed. Those Luggers who come in an assassin costume. The further he goes into factory, the more guard he attacks. A bug notices Ledger and follows him. A mage sees through that bug's eyes. He informs the others he's not police so they can kill him. They shoot all at Ledger, but their bullet are blocked by his magic. He shoots them back, killing them one after the other. They all freak out when suddenly one of the guards comes out with full body armor and a stun weapon. When he shoots Ledger, the energy is absorbed by the Ledger's metal magic. He shoots back at the tank, which electrocutes the guards. Ledger notices the insect close to him and shoots it. He understands as he is being watched. Then he activates an area magic to get rid of all the insects. The mage using the insects is annoyed. He asks everyone to get ready. Suddenly the light goes out and Ledger attacks everyone. Seeing his brother getting scared, capitals the insect mage pulls a centipede out of his sleeves to infect his brother. Ledger burns the mage while Ledger attacks the others. He gets attacked by an insect leg. The insect mage's brother has turned into giant bug. After being bitten, it looks like a giant centipede. When the other members try to run away, they get killed by the giant bug. This monster is Ledger fights with all their might. Ledger uses magic fire, but the bug dodges as Ledger seems to be flanked. He continues to use magic, but it seems ineffective against the giant bug's natural armor. Ledger has no other choice. He didn't want to use it, but he's going to have to. He puts his arm forward. He activates his magic circle. Meanwhile, Hans starts to feel cold outside when suddenly a light starts to shine. Light rays come out of the factory and the pillars of flames eventually appear, setting the factory on fire. But he took care of everything. He also discovered that he supported them financially and he is going to take care of it. In a mansion a little further, an old man is pissed. He provided so much money in the experiments and it's all over, so he wished he could change his weak body to regain his youth. As he enters his room, Ledger, who is hidden in the shadows, the call by his name Belford XN. There is nothing he can do and put down. Immediately, Ledger has already placed a sound barrier. No one will be able to come and help them. Ledger asks him a question. He asks him what he thinks of the feelings of the person who has had no other choice than to burn a child of this insert. He was one of the subjects of experimentation. Belford laughs. He tells him with conviction that he gave them the opportunity to accomplish at least one thing in their life without value to contribute to the development equivalent of humanity. This answer pissed off the genre. He sticks a needle in his neck and inserts the whole vial of the drug used for the experiments. A small dose can turn a human into a werewolf. Luger asks him what could anyone do. Bottle of this product. Belfort begins to transform. Several arms begin to grow. He becomes a monstrous. Luger removes the sound barrier and leaves the mansion. As all the members of the mansion are alerted by the noise, they see the giant monster in Belfort's room and think he has been devoured by this monster. He attacks and burns him to death. As Luger returns to their base, he places a chest with a fortune on the table from Belfort which he stole before leaving. Hans can use whatever he needs. As he leaves the base, he mentions that he will soon be using an identity a bit more suited to the underworld. The next morning, an investigation is carried out at the Belfort mansion. 3 departmental security investigators arrive at the manor. They are very well known. Their leaders are nicknamed the Lord Protector. Once in the room of Belfort, she sees the corpse and notices something suspicious. He has always been linked to black magic and the monster. The fact that he was killed by a monster can't be a coincidence. As they flee the room, she discovers a room hidden away from her to protect a chest full of money. So she understands that it is indeed a murder. The only person who comes to mind at this moment is Arsene Lupin, the only criminal to have succeeded in surpassing her. It is about one of the identities of Luger. Back in Luger Academy, feels really bad. He used way too much magic after taking the pills. He thinks back to Aiden. He wonders if the sight is something and if that was why he blocked him during the incident on the werewolves. He wonders if must kill him. Back on the investigation, the 3 investigators are at the site of the factory fire. Everything is in ruins. They come up with the theory that the factory was in use and who burned it all down so they wouldn't get caught, but that means they tried to hide the clues at that point from their pursuer. But who could it be? Asking if there have been any other incidents recently, the Eye replies that there has been a werewolf problem at the academy. It would have been handled by a new professor. He would have burnt the werewolves to the point that nothing was left of them. Back at the academy, the students discuss the rumor that the genre would have hunted a werewolf. All the world is surprised when he sees Lin and the princess discussing as equals and sitting together. When Luger enters the classroom, a silence is heard. They will make short on the principle of the elemental attributes. They know all the principle of the 4 elements, but he will show them a new method, the method to increase his elemental power from 20 to 80%. Everyone is shocked but doesn't think he's missing given his previous lesson. He shows them an example by creating a ball of energy that becomes a snowy star. Everyone seems interested in this method, even Florlamo. Luger's gaze intensely demonstrates the 4 elements. He asks them why this magic has as much developed. Using fire as an example, the students' theories seem incorrect. Flora speaks up, saying that fire is for burning and killing. Luger validates her answer. The elements were developed for warfare, but they can be used for improvement of life. The purpose of a magic changes according to human actions. Hiding for a better world. This is the idea to have before learning elementary magic. It then asks everyone to materialize an elementary sphere. It judges and directs the students one after the other, then turns to Veridane, who still has not created his sphere. Having a machine in common, he has not of experience with this type of magic. The students are shocked to see Luger and Aiden to understand how to manifest this magic. He asks him to remember the brightest flame he has seen. He then remembers a ear-warming roaring fire during the winter season. Suddenly a flame springs from his hands. It is not a flame to burn, but to heal. That is exactly what he was looking to teach with this course. Use magic according to their own experience. Instead of learning stupidly from a book, they have to create their own floral magic. Humo is a little disappointed. She already knew all that, as she also wants to be complimented. Her idea is to set up a difficult magic, a combination of several elements, but she loses control and the spell threatens to explode. Everyone starts running away. However, Luger comes in front of her and tells her to focus while helping stabilize her magic in Flora's past. Everyone looked at him with envy and jealousy. She hated it, and the only scary thing was to face her father's cold stare. Like she never existed. When Luger gave her 10 penalty points, it reminded her of the bad memories of her past. When going back to the course, Luger manages to stabilize her magic, and she finally manages to form her sphere. However, Luger tells her that she did a stupid thing. It's okay if she makes mistakes, but she shouldn't force others to suffer the consequences. When he tells her that there is a major flaw in her ability to combine things, she refuses to believe it. He demonstrates to her immediately after he tells Flora that his magic is only to be pretty, but that's all she has to find a purpose beyond that. When he uses his magic, snowflakes fall from the sky, and she understands that she suffered a total defeat. Luger not reprimanding her because of her lack of ability, but only because her magic is meaningless. She must live up to her worth. When she finds the courage to look at him in the eyes, he did not laugh at her or do not look at her with my prices, but with compassion. By continuing the course, he sees that the Ina is struggling to materialize his element. She does not actually have any element. He sounds the end of the class and asks Lines to follow him in his office. She is called to the the idea of being kicked out of her class for her lack of ability. Against all odds he passes her a book. It is a help book for magic. No. Elementary. When she asks him where he could see her, he says he knew a person like her, but she is already more of this world. The innate condemned not to be able to learn other magic, but he says that those who can only learn one element have infinite talent in that element, so she doesn't have to worry about her future. Later today, and Aiden practices materializing an element by turning her head. There sees aristocrats, and the son of Baron Filio arrives and laughs at him for not being able to materialize his own element. During the course he asks him to kneel in front of him and insults his friends, which is wonderful. Dan he makes a request to him of a magical duel. At the same time Luger sees what is happening and is to stop it, but Professor Chris Beanymore intervenes, saying that they have the right to have a duel between students. He takes the opportunity to make a bet with Luger. Benimore bet on Isel Filio, while Luger bet on Aiden. Whoever loses will have to hand over their entire research. He badly wants Luger's work after Prof Beanymore is gone, and Aiden apologizes to Prof Ledger. He doesn't trust his abilities, but Ledger tells him he was going to abilities thinking about his uncommon magic, but he had promised his master never to use it in front of people he wants to win without it use, and asks Lugger to teach him conventional magic. And Aiden remembers his master's teachings. She told him that he must not show his magic recklessly. He can use it if he really needs to, but he has to avoid it because it will only bring him bad luck. He has to follow his heart. Back to the present moment, Luger is pissed because he accepted the bet only because of his uncommon magic, but he accepts Aiden's request. He will train him in elemental magic, but this training will be hell in the evening. Professor Beanymore is delighted to know that Ludger is training and Aiden. That means he is surely desperate. He says to I am selling Filio of battery. Aiden, even if he has to cheat, he has to show the difference between nobles and commoners. He gives him a magic amplifying potion for him to drink before the fight. The next morning, the time a duel is coming. Everyone is there to witness this duel. Even the headmistress came. Everyone knows that there is a bet between Professor Luger and Professor Benheimer. The two students enter the scene with enchanted armor as the duel begins, and Aiden sends an ice magic as Isel uses a fire magic. They are evenly matched, but thanks to Professor Beanymore's potion, the fire magic takes over, and threatened by Donkey, he manages to narrowly avoid him. Both continue to use spells, but Aiden is losing, so he decides to run in the direction of the wind games while activating a magic circle. Professor Beanymore is shocked. It's the basic movement maneuver. The mages must stay in place to activate the magic, but here he activates the magic by running. It is a skill used by the combat mages during the wars. He wonders how he could have learned that in 3 days, and especially how to tell him knows this kind of technique. However, Isel has already finished casting his next spell of electric magic, and Aiden manages to dodge again and put down Isel. He won this duel. Isel can't arrive to understand how he could lose against a commoner. He is convinced that Dan played a trick on him. When he is enraged, he casts a new spell on Aiden when he sees magic happen on him, and Aiden uses his magic in common in public for the first time. His magic is to cancel magic. It's anti-magic. Everyone is shocked to see this, especially Professor Bennymore. Then Aiden hits Isel, who falls unconscious. The other nobles are annoyed by the fact that a commoner is beaten. A noble but pro in Ralborg, the leader of the group of students, Noble Nye, pays no more attention because he was not interested in the son of the Baron. Professor Bennymore asks Lugger if he knew about his anti-magic. He replies that yes, after all is written in the documents related to the students. Professor Bennymore should him know, but it looks like he didn't read the documents. But Lugger is not stressed because the anti-magic took place that after the duel ended. Professor Bennymore is annoyed, but he asks Lugger what research he wants having. However, Lugger refuses to steal someone else's work. It's not his thing. This sentence annoys Benheimer crises even more. While Lugger returns to his office, it's Dinarachane was waiting for him in the hallway. She says he's going to have even more attention after this duel. He tells her that the director finds him suspicious, but that he can handle this situation. He will need the help of his dinards. She must become a full student. So Faith, don't be suspicious. At their secret meeting, it's Dina is so enthusiastic that she says she will even if she has to die. Lugger tells her not to die, but she outbids that she will not die even if she has to die, which confuses him hard. Recent events can demonstrate that Lugger takes sides with the academy, which is risky on the organizational side. He must then act. Haunts the contact, telling him that he has analyzed the situation of the underworld. It seems that Lugger must act to restore his position in a hostel. There are several underworld clans who quoted one of them had invested in Belford. All of a sudden Lugger enters the hostel. He asks him if's the killer the leader of the Red Secret Society. He introduces himself as James Moriarty, the crime consultant. It's been years since he used this identity and hasn't given any sign of life from the killing. Doubts his identity and wants to verify it. He asks everyone to attack him. He smiles faced with this threat. By getting up, he uses a spell to block the guns, and all of a sudden Hans transformed into a werewolf attacks everyone. They are 2 against a whole army. The doubt raised he is indeed the legendary James Moriarty, but Lugger does not want his help. He asks him to dissolve the Red Society. This threat is badly taken, and he attacks all. Lugger tabs Saken on the ground and spreads a magic of darkness. The only light. Present is his blade that he just unsheathed. Itis a massacre, they all fall. After the others when he withdraws his magic of darkness alone and standing, he ends the show by killing the last survivors, the close guard of Deuteria, and knows in turn to attack him. Luger throws a vial which explodes on the ground and which retains his sword on the ground. Luger raises his pistol, but it's a feint to attack him from behind with magic coming from his shadow. Normally the magic must necessarily be cast close to the magician, but Luger has developed a technique to cast it from a distance. He ends up the fight with a bullet in the head. He approaches the killer with a demonic smile and tells him that they have to have a little talk. The fight is over. Luger and Hans are drinking alcohol at the hostel and Luger announces a big news, the creation of his own organization. The organization, an O, and it means a no so unknown in English. Back to the academy, Selena asks why Luger still hasn't taken an assistant. He says that he doesn't send the utility, but in reality he didn't know he had the right to have one. The teachers take students as an assistant to reduce the workload, but the others suggest him to take one, so he looks at the list of recommended students. He sees his dean is in it. He leaves his office and she follows him asking him to leave. She doesn't know what to say. He goes on inside of him asking to become his assistant and she accepts. In just an hour she filled out the request for assistant. As class is getting ready started a curved rumor among the students Professor Lugers would be looking for assistants. This is a very tempting offer, but an even more mind-blowing rumor spreads. The worst universal an object that would have the power to grant anyone she wants would be in the academy. Flora Lumo doesn't really believe it, but she is more intrigued by the request for an assistant of the Udget. She is convinced that the professor will make a request to her in person. After all, she is the only one strong enough to assist this overpowered monster, but her disillusion is seen after the announcement of Luger's arrival. This is an announcement from Selena. Flora is shocked to see that he already has an assistant she wanted to be her first teacher. Luger enters the class letting Sedina know that she can leave. As he begins the course he is cut off by a pupil. Julia Plumer too asks him how he got his assistant. It is not a request out of courtesy. She is surely trying to defame him, but he replies that he does chose himself. He recruits in relation to the behavior of the students. If she thinks she can do it, then she can pass her interview to become his assistant, but tells him that she definitely does not look like to a person who could be her assistant. She does not know what to answer. After class Flora comes to see Luger. She remains interested in assisting him but does not show it, then thanks him for what he did in the last class. He replies that any teacher would have done it, and if she changes her mind she can become his assistant. Following the principal's call, Luger finds herself in her office. She wants to tell her about the universal stone. Luger thought it was that a rumor, but it does exist. It is a unique and mysterious item that has existed since ancient times, a relic of the past, but it is supposed to be a best kept secret. If there are any rumors then the information leaks. She wants the kind questing on the situation. It might look like trust, but in reality she's judging him. Back in his office he thinks about it all. He finally found a relic. The reason he keeps changing identities and venturing into countless regions it is to find the pieces of a certain relic. Even if the universal stone is not one of the pieces he is looking for, she could locate one at the same time and makes contact to report the situation to him. He says that the other organizations are calm since the massacre of the Red Society. However, people are starting to make noise. He should come and help him, but he can help him only in a week. He has to take care of the relic first. Later in the evening the princess is resting in her room when everything has gone down. Investigator the call. She would be related to royalty. She asks him about the professor who went busy with werewolves. She wants to meet Luger as soon as possible. Following this call the three investigators apparently discuss the Red Society has suddenly disappeared, but as it is not related to the investigation they will not look any further. While Luger lectures the sleepy students, so they decide to show them something interesting. The picture manifests their magic less than a meter away as they are the center of appearance, but it is possible to widen this distance to demonstrate these arguments. He makes a ball of fire appear in front of a sleeping student. If we accept that the magic consumption can increase, then it is possible to cast the spells further. He calls it the coordinate assignment formula. No one has ever heard of this. Flora was gobsmacked. She wonders what the hell could he learn that kind of magic. He showed them to make them realize they need good foundations to develop their magic. Then they must listen in class and take step by step what happens to understand the secret of this technique. Han goes see him in his office and he will give them reward points when he comes back to his office. The manager calls him. He puts up a woven barrier. It looks like the universal stone has been stolen and asks him to fix it. Then Sedina walks into his office to give her another bad news, but he understood what was happening. Apparently someone wanted to act on his own. She nods. He asks her to explain in detail. It seems that the Third Order to be found information about the universal stone and told it to the Second Order, who himself took the initiative to act. His name has half leaves. He would apparently be after the prime position held by Luger, so Luger sets off to take care of all that. Before leaving he thanks his Dina, who thanks him crying with joy. As he leaves his office he activates a magic that allows him to be invisible. He moves through the whole school to go find the Second Order, but passing in front of Floral Humo she notices the use of fat magic, his talent which allows him to feel the magic around, and she begins to follow him from afar. It seems that the track leads to the forest. In the forest 2000 he is mad with rage. He has the stone in his hands, but it does not work. He does not understand why it does not react when everything is. Suddenly Luger arrives. The whole group begins to shake and kneel in front of the First Order. He calls him John Doe. Offers himself the stone to Luger to apologize, but he deletes them with a blow of earth magic. While the kind holds the stone, he notices that it is not a relic. Suddenly a magic forms above him. A ray comes crashing down on the forest and pulverizes the whole area. It is the magic of the director. In truth, she is the source of the rumors. She replaced the stone with a pit to be able to eliminate the traitors. Luger was able to escape the attack by hiding behind a tree. A little further he used teleportation magic in diving into the coordinate assignment formula, but he now has to pay the price. He starts having auditory hallucinations, but luckily he has some pills left which he takes immediately. He wonders if that was the director's intention to have asked him to take care of the stone to be able to eliminate it. Notices a presence and attacks it, but it is Flora. While the two are bickering, Flora's friend arrives. All panicked, Luger tells them to follow him. He will bring them back to the academy. However, Flora has seen him take medicine and she wonders if the sick people are back there. He meets the director of the teachers. She asks them what they are doing here. Flora explains the situation and the director lets this error pass. Luger takes the responsibility of bringing them back to the academy. Following this exchange, the director no longer suspects the Uter. She observed him well and did not feel anything suspicious at his house. Going to the academy catacombs, she says the real stone was moved to safety before this staging and leaving the catacombs. Luger had infiltrated through his invisibility magic. He uses the universal stone to know the location of the shards of the relic, but it is not powerful enough to locate all the shards. He was able to locate one of them anyway. He seems to be close to returning to the academy. He contacts Hans to tell him the news. A shard of the relic is here in Lutherbulk, surely for the auction. The next morning he sees Flora outside his office asking her what she is doing here. She is speechless. She doesn't know if she should tell him about her magic yesterday or about her medicine, so she shows him that she has learned the coordinate assignment formula. He is surprised that she hasn't been able to take it in a few days, and she asks for a reward for that, so he brings her to his research laboratory. She is lost. She does not understand the writings on the boards. Luger tells her that she has surely figured out the mathematical problem behind the assignment of coordinates, but in reality she only took thanks to her special ability to reward her. He shows her some experimental magic. He creates a blind bottle which results in overwhelming Flora's senses and to make him lose consciousness. When he wakes up, Luger tells him that he has understood his ability. He tells him not to show it to anyone because everyone would want to exploit him if it was known. Luger has no use for it. Then he tells him to leave since it is getting late. As night falls, Luger joins Hans to go to the auction house to meet the various companies that deal with the auctions. He is under the identity of Moriarty. He is all on the 4th floor. It is a zone of non-aggression between society. They are all suspicious. The great James Moriarty arrives in town and destroys the Red Society, then asks them for an audience. A few days later, he reassures them that he's not going to do anything to them. He just wants to establish his power in the city, not like the Red Society but in a more elegant way. He wants to control the lobby of the entertainment. When he shows his project Gable Boss, he starts laughing very enthusiastically. He wants to invent musical comedy in this world. It's a pretty big project to control the entertainment industry and to make all the leaders rich. They all agree to follow him. After the meeting, Luger notices that he is being followed. This is one of the leaders of the reunion. Her name is Violetta. He asks Anne to leave and he's going to talk to her. Since she agreed to work with him, she can't hide her situation from him by removing her veil. She has a burn caused by magic. Even the highest priests have given up on treating her, but since she showed him something so personal, he has to show him something worthy. He approaches her and removes his burn with a movement of his fingers. He used his real magic. Looking at himself, she doesn't understand nothing when suddenly she makes Luger attack, dives to protect her. It seems that some members of the Red Society are still alive. They want to kill Moriarty. They took care to use a diffuse poison to prevent them from using magic. It is then that Luger asks Violetta if she knows how to dance, and she responds positively while positioning herself to fight. They fight teenagers, but he begins to tire while they are surrounded. Luger notices that this method resembles certain assassins, so he decides to flee, taking Violetta in his arms. Two assassins follow them closely. He uses his grappling hook to get ahead, but they are already there as Violetta blocks, attacks him with her umbrella. They do under the effect of the poison. He both decides to run away to think of a decoy. As the assassins follow them, they see raping your only. He thinks it's a decoy, but it's already too late. Luger has already had one from behind as the other is about to attack him. He disarms him with his grappling hook, but Luger pulls out a hidden weapon to kill kill him first. After this fight he asks to Violetta to investigate the person behind the assassin. She accepts and he separates. Astray to their occupation by returning to their base, Luger sees that Anne is Sheridan are fighting Sheridan is the will engineer who recruited her a few years ago. They met her while she was captive in a mine and was going to blow up everything at the Dynamics. He asks her to fix her grappling hook since it broke. He isn't powerful enough to handle people. She says it'll take her about 10 minutes. While she waits, he looks out the window and sees a well-trained troop of knights. He almost gets spotted. It's the 3 investigators right after Sheridan brings the version of the grappling hook upgraded to Luger. He can now support 2 people, and on top of that he has a hidden blade and can throw a poison dart. The 3 investigators go to the scene of the incident with the assassins. Luckily Luger got rid of all the evidence beforehand, but they can get a vague idea of who took care of the assassins. He would be a mage who can fight hand to hand. The next morning Luger returns to the academy. He sees Elena waiting for him outside his office. It looks like an investigator is waiting for him in his office. It's about the the Lord Protector's subordinate. They both talk about the werewolf incident, but nothing incriminating Ledger. He leaves on a handshake as he has just left. Ledger's gaze becomes gloomy. The eye reports the situation. He did as the Protector Lord asked him. He checked every nook and cranny of his office and taking advantage of this exchange to check his morphology by shaking his hand. It seems that Professor Lugers is a mage who has never held a sword, but in reality he had already anticipated this kind of event. That's why he had asked Sheridan to prepare an artificial skin for him. As he was about to leave, the headmistress intercepted them. They knew each other very well. She was even the one who refused to let the Protector Lord meet Luger in person. That's why Lloyd was sent instead. Following this event, the first check starts as promised. The first 5 will be able to learn the source code. At the end of the check, most of the students are discouraged. They had permission to use their lessons, but the questions were far too hard for most of them. Even the princess had a lot of difficulty when Line found it rather simple. The director was pleasantly surprised when she read the subject of the test. It requires good foundations and a basic knowledge of magic, but embellished with traps to increase the difficulty. It's a better subject than this coffee Chris Benimar who only used scientific terms. To brag, she is very curious to see her face currently, because all teachers have to check each other's subjects. When he is enraged, he casts a new spell on Aiden when he sees magic happen on him, and Aiden uses his magic in common in public for the first time. His magic is to cancel magic. It's anti-magic. Everyone is shocked to see this, especially Professor Benimore. Then Aiden hits Isel, who falls unconscious. The other nobles are annoyed by the fact that a commoner is beaten. A noble but pro in Ralborg, the leader of the group of students, Noble Nye, pays no more attention because he was not interested in the son of the Baron. Professor Benimore asks Luger if he knew about his anti-magic. He replies that yes, after all is written in the documents related to the students. Professor Benimore should him know, but it looks like he didn't read the documents. But Luger is not stressed because the anti-magic took place. After the duel ended, Professor Benimore is annoyed, but he asks Luger what research he wants having. However, Luger refuses to steal someone else's work. It's not his thing. This sentence annoys Benimor Crises even more. While Luger returns to his office, it's Dinarachane was waiting for him in the hallway. She says he's going to have even more attention after this duel. He tells her that the director finds him suspicious, but that he can handle this situation. He will need the help of his Dinards. She must become a full student. So Faith, don't be suspicious at their secret meeting. It's Dina is so enthusiastic that she says she will even if she has to die. Luger tells her not to die, but she outbids that she will not die even if she has to die, which confuses him hard. Recent events can demonstrate that Luger takes sides with the academy, which is risky. On the organizational side, he must then act. Haunts the contact, telling him that he has analyzed the situation of the underworld. It seems that Luger must act to restore his position in a hostel. There are several underworld clans who quoted one of them had invested in Belford. All of a sudden Luger enters the hostel. He asks him if's the killer the leader of the Red Secret Society. He introduces himself as James Moriarty, the crime consultant. It's been years since he used this identity and hasn't given any sign of life from the killing. Doubts his identity and wants to verify it. He asks everyone to attack him. He smiles faced with this threat. By getting up, he uses a spell to block the guns, and all of a sudden Hans transformed into a werewolf attacks everyone. They are 2 against a whole army. The doubt raised he is indeed the legendary James Moriarty, but Luger does not want his help. He asks him to dissolve the Red Society. This threat is badly taken, and he attacks all. Luger tabs Saken on the ground and spreads a magic of darkness. The only light present is his blade that he just unsheathed. It is a massacre. They all fall after the others when he withdraws his magic of darkness. Alone and standing, he ends the show by killing the last survivors, the close guard of Duturia, and knows in turn to attack him. Luger throws a vial which explodes on the ground and which retains his sword on the ground. Luger raises his pistol, but it's a feint to attack him from behind with magic coming from his shadow. Normally the magic must necessarily be cast close to the magician, but Ludger has developed a technique to cast it from a distance. He ends up the fight with a bullet in the head. He approaches the killer with a demonic smile and tells him that they have to have a little talk. The fight is over. Ludger and Hans are drinking alcohol at the hostel and Ludger announces a big news: the creation of his own organization. The organization, an O, and it means a no so unknown in English. Back to the academy, Selena asks why Ludger still hasn't taken an assistant. He says that he doesn't send the utility, but in reality he didn't know he had the right to have one. The teachers take students as an assistant to reduce the workload, but the others suggest him to take one, so he looks at the list of recommended students. He sees his dean is in it. He leaves his office and she follows him, asking him to leave. She doesn't know what to say. He goes on inside of him, asking to become his assistant, and she accepts. In just an hour she filled out the request for assistant. As class is getting ready, started a curved rumor among the students Professor Lugers would be looking for assistants. This is a very tempting offer, but an even more mind-blowing rumor spreads: the worst universal, an object that would have the power to grant anyone she wants, would be in the academy. Flora Lumo doesn't really believe it, but she is more intrigued by the request for an assistant of the Udget. She is convinced that the professor will make a request to her in person. After all, she is the only one strong enough to assist this overpowered monster. But her disillusion is seen after the announcement of Ludger's arrival. This is an announcement from Selena. Flora is shocked to see that he already has an assistant she wanted to be her first teacher. Ludger enters the class, letting Sedina know that she can leave. As he begins the course, he is cut off by a pupil. Julia Plumer too asks him how he got his assistant. It is not a request out of courtesy. She is surely trying to defame him, but he replies that he does chose himself. He recruits in relation to the behavior of the students. If she thinks she can do it, then she can pass her interview to become his assistant, but tells him that she definitely does not look like to a person who could be her assistant. She does not know what to answer. After class, Flora comes to see Ludger. She remains interested in assisting him but does not show it, then thanks him for what he did in the last class. He replies that any teacher would have done it, and if she changes her mind, she can become his assistant. Following the principal's call, Ludger finds herself in her office. She wants to tell her about the universal stone. Ludger thought it was that a rumor, but it does exist. It is a unique and mysterious item that has existed since ancient times, a relic of the past, but it is supposed to be a best kept secret. If there are any rumors, then the information leaks. She wants the kind questing on the situation. It might look like trust, but in reality she's judging him. Back in his office, he thinks about it all. He finally found a relic. The reason he keeps changing identities and venturing into countless regions, it is to find the pieces of a certain relic. Even if the universal stone is not one of the pieces he is looking for, she could locate one at the same time and makes contact to report the situation to him. He says that the other organizations are calm since the massacre of the Red Society. However, people are starting to make noise. He should come and help him, but he can help him only in a week. He has to take care of the relic first. Later in the evening, the princess is resting in her room when everything has gone down. Investigator the call. She would be related to royalty. She asks him about the professor who went busy with werewolves. She wants to meet Ludger as soon as possible. Following this call, the three investigators apparently discuss the Red Society has suddenly disappeared, but as it is not related to the investigation, they will not look any further. While Ludger lectures the sleepy students, so they decide to show them something interesting. The picture manifests their magic less than a meter away, as they are the center of appearance, but it is possible to widen this distance to demonstrate these arguments. He makes a ball of fire appear in front of a sleeping student. If we accept that the magic consumption can increase, then it is possible to cast the spells further. He calls it the coordinate assignment formula. No one has ever heard of this. Flora was gobsmacked. She wonders what the hell could he learn that kind of magic. He showed them to make them realize they need good foundations to develop their magic. Then they must listen in class and take step by step what happens to understand the secret of this technique. Han goes see him in his office, and he will give them reward points when he comes back to his office. The manager calls him. He puts up a woven barrier. It looks like the universal stone has been stolen, and asks him to fix it. Then Sedina walks into his office to give her